Welcome in to the Hustle Short. Kelly in Vegas here, CT Bets. We're going to get into it because we got to go to the Real Hustle show today. I'm filling in for BP, aka Brian Power. CT, how was your weekend?
Kel, Saturday was a little bit of a grind. It was up and down. It started great, and it ended in an absolute disaster. Kudos to you. You had Notre Dame. USC was one of my best bets for the day. Ended up 5-5 on Saturday. Well, what does a veteran better do, Kel? You wake up the next morning and you grind out NFL. My best bet on Sunday morning was the Ravens. Although the TV almost came off the wall with about a minute and 40 seconds left. And you and I just had this conversation about how to not flip out during games. The wheels almost came off for CT. But luckily, a couple of a bad penalty taken by Malik Willis and the Titans and the Ravens hold on to cover a wire to wire, pretty much cover that game.
I am so frustrated about that game. Brett and I were driving home from my dad's house, and he's like, "Hey, Sharp Group played the over, 8 field goals." We're driving, and we have this like little box thing that you can hook up to your navigation, so you can watch the game. Well, he was driving, and I was watching the game. But that being said, I was like ready to break the navigation every time the Ravens got in the red zone. So I'm happy you and Ariel both got the cover there. But mother of God, it should have been 34-17. Like, it was the most red zone inept two teams I've seen all year. And it actually makes me want to bet against the Ravens this week with the Lions. TBD if I get to the window with them. But man, they've got to get something going there. Overall, good weekend by me. I will take it considering I have not had the best season. We'll see if we can't keep things going this week, CT, even though you and I wouldn't say we're head to head, but we have a disagreement in a game or two. But first, we're going to talk about Survivor. And I've got it all mapped out. You know, I'm a nerd. I have all my nerd charts and my spreadsheets and all that dorky shit that everybody makes fun of me about, or they don't even know that I do because I should get back in the kitchen according to the Oklahoma Sooners fan base. But that being said, pretty much had the Seahawks penciled in for this week. We got the winner with the Rams last week, survive in advance, even though at halftime it looked terrible. I was at the Bucks Lions game and you grinded it at home for us. I'm glad I just turned it off at halftime. And then it was easy. No sweat.
I did. I knew you were at the Bucks game. I was at the bar having a couple Vivas, and I watched that every single snap of that game. And the Rams struggled big time in the first half, clearly. And I knew it was only a matter of time before Stafford got it going. Kel, he was making some terrible throws, some bad decisions on defense, caught some costly penalties. And I said to myself, I looked at the line second half, Rams -6. Rams to win by a field goal and you push the game. I'm like, they're going to actually come back and cover this whole game for Kel. She's going to get the best bet winner. We're going to move on in Survivor. They're going to look a lot better. I slammed it second half personally, which was great. And they did. Grinded every single snap out for us. And it was a great best bet by you. And CT and Kelly move on and survive another week in Circus Survivor. Not too many people went out, Kel.
No. You know what we could have really used would have been a Giants outright winner. Not that
Yes.
many people had Philadelphia, which I could see probably a lot of people are keeping them for Christmas or have already used them. And I was honestly surprised to see more people didn't have the Niners, but they'd probably used them the same week that you and I did. So it kind of is what it is for that fact. But hey, like what? 1,300, less than 1,300 people remain. We've used some really good teams, but the name of the game is Survive in Advance. This week, I'm doing what I did last week, and I've kind of got some play on spots and some play against spots that I took notes in. Our good friend Mark Lawrence from Playbook puts out a publication every single football season, and he always has a little excerpt here and there on spots to look to play on or against teams historically. And I looked at that Rams game, and I said, all right, what have we seen from the Cardinals, right? They looked good against the NFC East. You and I spoke about this last week because Gannon was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles in the NFC East. And since then, they're 0-3 against the spread. They have played 3 of 4 teams in the division this week. Seattle, I'm just going with Seattle. I teased them down. I played them as my best bet. This is a spot that Seattle has historically owned the Cardinals, particularly in Seattle. The Cardinals 1-10 straight up in divisional games They just don't win divisional games. They just haven't been. Whether it's Kyler Murray or Josh Dobbs, it doesn't matter. This defense has some serious issues. They've looked good in almost every single first half except for the Niners. So I can see it being a close game again. Russell Wilson and company pull away here in the second half. I think this is the best spot to use the Seahawks. There's another week that I had slated because normally I don't like to use divisional games, and you and I have kind of went back and forth on that. But wanted to get your thoughts before we locked it in.
Yeah, we're on the same page. We've kind of had Seattle circled for week 7 for a while now, and I'm with you. I agree. Seattle's your best bet. I like Seattle this weekend as well. Dobbs, I don't trust Dobbs to go into Seattle and get the win, especially after the Seahawks just lost a really tough game on the road in Cincy. That I watched that game as well. That was a 1:00 game. Back and forth there. Seattle had their chances to win that game. Now you get to come home. And the 12th man, the place will be rocking and rolling. Well, I don't know if it will be rocking and rolling, but they'll make it so it's rocking and rolling, right? That's what Seattle does. And Dobbs, he's had a few good quarters, Kel. I haven't seen him put a whole game together, and I don't think he's going to be able to. I like Seattle and Pete to get right off of the loss, and this is our best, our best team available to pick here because we don't really have too many other options, right? We've used Buffalo. We haven't used the Ravens, right? But that's, I don't know.
We haven't used the Ravens, but you kind of have to wonder. There's 3 other spots where I have the Ravens, and I don't want to give away too much of our strategy, but there's 3 other spots on my spreadsheet where I have the Ravens. One thing John Murray said yesterday on the podcast, though, was week 17 is a spot to use the Ravens. Excuse me, week 18. There's a couple of teams that we have, but I was like, oh, maybe. Well, you kind of don't want to necessarily save that team for week 18 either because they may have nothing to play for, right? So we've got to use 20 teams in the Circa Survivor. That means there's 12 we don't have to use. I think you and I could agree there's definitely 6 teams that you and I want 0 part of. Starting with the Panthers, probably the Bears. Let's see, who else? The Broncos, the Pats. I mean, this is just off the top of my head. I have a list in my phone that we could go over, but we could for sure agree that there's at least 6 teams we don't use. And then there's a couple weird, what I would say is like bottom tier teams that we may or may not have to use. The Vikings, the Titans, the Packers, you kind of get in the muck down there. So right now, my strategy is we just got to get to Thanksgiving. If we can get to Thanksgiving, we just got to get to Christmas. And somewhere in that, I think we definitely are going to need the Ravens. So I'm glad that we have some good teams saved. And honestly, I wouldn't want to use the Ravens this week anyway. Coming back from London is always a wonky thing, right? It wasn't a play against for the Jags last week. Everybody had the Colts. Didn't matter. Jags looked great. Or the Colts looked terrible. Didn't get to watch that one. But in the stat box, the Colts looked terrible. So we'll see. We'll see if we can't survive in advance. As you mentioned, it's going to be rocking in Seattle. Whether it's fake noise or real noise, who cares?
And Kel, to bring back to your point about the Ravens for week 18, Kel, if we're sitting here on this show debating on who we're going to take week 18, sign me up right now. Sign me up if that's what our debate is for week 18. If we're there, I think we have a lot of a good in the world going for us. So I'm signing up for that.
I will say this. Johnny Detroit and I had the Ravens. I think it was 4 years ago, maybe 5. And we had them in his big money league survivor pool based out of his buddies that have all put together. I mean, it's like a $10,000 buy-in. And he's like, Kel, do you want to do this with me? And I'm like, sure. And we had the Ravens. They were 13.5-point favorites, and they lost outright. So I'll be really honest with you. I don't know if I'd even want to save the Ravens for that week after that bad taste in my mouth. That was very frustrating. But that one does go into the playoffs as well. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a different strategy. But obviously, we've got some teams that we need to save for prominent holidays. So that's what we're kind of doing right now.
Yeah, and it's a grind, and we talked about this last week, right? I mean, yeah, we've used a lot of good teams, but yeah, I mean, look how many people have went out. What I think 9,700 started in this Circa pool, and we're down to what is it 1,500, 1,600, right around there. Only like 40 entries went out last week, so it's a grind, and it's nice to have a partner to do it with and be along for the ride because you get to bounce stuff off of each
And
other. And
shockingly, I don't think we've even had one single argument. I think we've
this is
just
the
been like
first
in
year that we've
lockstep.
done it together. We have not had an argument, which is great. But Ariel says, she gives us to Thanksgiving to get into a blowout fight, and that's probably minus 300. So
Yeah, but we're keeping two teams for Thanksgiving unless we use one the week before. Like we can talk about that. There's on the list as
that's
well.
true.
But I do think we're doing the right. I think we're just like, okay, here's the progression. Plus, you have other entries. You got one with Uncle Benny. You've got a few with Trig. So there are other entries. So I think maybe I won't say that the value of our entry is worth more or less. It's just more so you've got things you want to spread out, right? Like last week, every single one of my entries was on the Rams. And I was like, oh, that's
Same.
gross.
Same.
This week, every single one of my entries but 2 is on Seattle. And that's kind of scary in itself as well. So you kind of just have those like, do we want to mix it up? There we go. We've
Yeah.
gotten 1,789 still
Okay.
surviving out of almost 9,300. Value per entry, 5,100. So if anybody wants to make me an offer to buy my entries, well, I've got 4 left in Circa Survivor now. The Commanders killed one of them. The Broncos killed one of them. The Broncos killed 2 of them, actually. Speaking of, I'm glad nobody else let me talk them into taking that trash team that is now on my list not to use whatsoever.
Well,
All right,
Trig and I have 3 left, Cal, and this isn't my call, but he's made the executive decision. We're going 1 Saints tonight, so fingers crossed. We're trying to get through with the Saints tonight, and
oh boy,
have some breathing room and be able to breathe easy because we're going with Seattle and our other 2 most likely.
Then I won't tell you where I have the Saints to use as 8-point and 7-point favorites. So on that note, we'll save that for the other Hustle show. CT,
Yeah.
one game you wanted to talk about that you really liked. I talked to Trig about this game earlier. I don't disagree with you. I think there's just a lot of real unknowns for me. And also being a K-State fan, I tweeted about this earlier, that fans need to be more objective about their team. You should know the most about your team, but you should also be able to take a step back, not be emotional about it, and say, this is what it is, right? And here's my problem with this K-State team. Had Will Howard stayed in last week versus Texas Tech, I think K-State would have lost that game. Now, granted, Texas Tech ended up with a backup quarterback of their own. I'm not going to say Avery Johnson is a backup quarterback. He is a true freshman who can absolutely run it. But Colin Klein knew Texas Tech cannot stop the run. Their run defense was atrocious. So I think it was the right play. But Will Howard coming off that 3-interception game versus the Cowboys kind of has me a little spooked, if you will. I'm a little nervous about his I won't say it's about his abilities, but I would say it's about his confidence. And so you like TCU. Did you get 7? I haven't got the Wager Talk odd screen open. I wouldn't be surprised to see if it did hit 7 for a blip in time.
I did. I got 7, and I bet it. And it wasn't even really that. I didn't handicap it right away, Kel. I just kind of said to myself, you and I follow the Big 12 a lot. I'm like, I just don't think TCU should be getting 7. And I think that line's probably going to close closer to 6, 5.5. I grabbed 7 right now. I'm correct. Looking at the Wager Talk odds screen, it's down to 6.5 most places. But then I started looking into the game a little bit, right, Cal? And talk about trigger man problem for both these squads, right? I mean, you hit on K-State's problems with Will Howard. Look, TCU 2 weeks ago, Chandler Morris, who was supposed to be the starting quarterback last year, who ended up getting hurt. And that's where Max Duggan took over and never looked back. He gets hurt versus in the Iowa State loss. And then backup redshirt freshman Josh Hoover in his first full game last week, he goes off against BYU. 37 for 58, throws for almost 450 yards, 4 touchdowns. And the Frogs rout BYU. Is that a great win? No, because BYU has really struggled so far getting adjusted into Big 12 football here. But I think it's worth noting he looks pretty settled in after a full week of practice with the ones. And Kelly, just something's been off with Will Howard this year. You know, I was all over the Wildcats last year. I had him huge in the Big 12 championship. I don't know what it is, but 2 weeks ago versus Oklahoma State, I kind of gave him a free pass because it was a really bad scheduling spot, I thought, on that Friday night. And then This past week, I was on K-State again. I thought Will Howard would be a lot better. He comes out, he was like 6 for 10 for 86 yards in the first half. So I don't know what's going on. He's the leader of this team. I really like Will Howard a lot. He just hasn't looked like himself. I don't know. Both these teams aren't the dominant Big 12 teams that we're used to seeing this year. And I think that if they do go with Avery Johnson, Kel, TCU is going to have all week to prepare for Avery Johnson and his wheels. He showed off last week scoring, I think he scored 4 or 5 touchdowns all himself, right? So I think if they do go with him, TCU and Sonny Dykes will be able to prepare for him. And if they don't, I don't know. There's something off with Will Howard, and I just think 6.5, 7 is a little too many here.
Yeah, I don't know. TCU's defensive coordinator is got his hands full. I'll say that much. Preparing for 2 quarterbacks is never fun. And for me, I was tweeting about it last week, and I had flashbacks of Bill Snyder, Daniel Sams, and Jake Waters when they were trying to run a 2-quarterback system, and it was infuriating. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I would agree. You can prepare for Avery Johnson. 5 touchdowns last week. Didn't look like they could stop him whatsoever. Little caveat, K-State 7-1 in their last 8 as a home favorite in Big 12 play. It is what it is. I'm not going to refute you here and act like K-State isn't a shell of its former self. We've had a lot of injuries. I can't believe I just said that. K-State has had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but Kobe Savage, 3 interceptions last week. Yeah. Granted, against a young quarterback at Texas Tech. A little asterisk there. I will give them that as well. But it's really going to be an interesting game here. TCU, obviously, revenge on their minds from the Big 12 championship game. But that team kind of looks like a shell of its former self from last year. I think it was 8 of their players went to the NFL. So we'll see. Kind of the rubber meets the road, what K-State's made of. On Saturday, I was debating on what I wanted to give out as far as my best bet for us, and I gave out Mississippi State on Bet on It. I talked about Colorado State on another podcast, so it's only natural. I'm going to give out South Carolina. And yes, just as I got clipped saying there's no way I can back South Carolina in my parlay, guess who called me? Well, Marco talked about South Carolina. I said, Marco, I can't do it. Did you see what this team did to me? They gave up like 184 fourth down conversions last week, up 10. It was disgusting. I was so mad, Chris. I was so frustrated with this team. And here I am. I let Adam Trigger talk me in to South Carolina. And it's not a play against Mizzou, but Mizzou has not had a bye week yet. This is their 8th straight game. Gamecocks have played the tougher schedule, and that's shocking, but if you look at the strength of schedule they have, Mizzou's played K-State, Memphis, LSU, Kentucky, but Gamecocks have played a significantly tougher one, including Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. So really interesting there. Tigers go from the hunter to the hunted. I think this is going to be a higher scoring affair, so points are not as necessarily as much as a premium, but whoever scores last is going to win. You would think Shane Beamer gets his team up and ready for this game in the other Columbia.
Let Trig talk you into a
I know.
play
Okay, let me phrase this.
Parlay. I'm just
the
mind blow emoji.
Let me say this.
Okay.
Marco planted the seed, right?
Okay.
Trig just dumped gasoline on it and was like, because these are my other options. Just full disclosure. I don't think Tennessee can go into Tuscaloosa and win. I made that game 7.5, but 9 doesn't mean there's any value there. Plus, Alabama revenge from last year. I don't trust Alabama laying that many points yet again, but I'd be surprised. UAB, ask me how many UAB games I've watched this year. Auburn, you want me to take that offense? No. I've already been down that road. So my only real option this week, Akron. I text BP about Akron. I mean, what am I going to do here? I'm looking for touchdown-ish underdogs. I looked at Duke. I may be on Duke. I don't think Duke can go into Tallahassee and win that game. So that's kind of where I'm in this. And I've said this before. I've never hit a parlay after week 6, historically. If you look, dating back to when I started doing these, I've never hit one after week 6 because you start to see the cream rise to the top. Conference play is much harder than, non-conference games. There are a lot of factors that go into it. The lines get tighter as the season goes on. So I hate this week. It is what it is. What do I do?
Kel, let me ask you. I know we're up against it. This isn't a game I played or anything, and I hate, you and I talk about this all the time. I hate when people go on shows and they say, I haven't seen one person on this team, that's why I like them. Okay, I don't really have an opinion here, but it seems like they might as well not even play the USC Utah game, and Utah has no shot. That's what it seems like to me. USC did not look good at all last week.
No.
I just wanted to bring that. I think Utah has got a great defense. I think they have a shot to
You're
win
not
that game.
wrong. You're not wrong.
You know?
I did a show on Tuesday night with some guys. The podcast is called We Hate Your Team, which is a hilarious podcast name because you should hate all these teams unless you have a bet against them. I said I leaned Utah. Here was the problem, CT. Caleb Williams, worst game of his career, right?
Yeah.
And I will say this, Utah has played such lockdown defense. It almost is like what's the right word? It's almost like the line is begging you to take Utah, right? Because, and me as a dog better. And I said, here's all the reasons why I think this game is going to go this way or that way. Can Caleb Williams rebound from that horrific performance? I was on Notre Dame last week, and that was only in a situation, right? This was not like I loved it. It was like a flat spot for USC, even though it shouldn't have been. I don't know. The Utes play so much better at home, right? We just know that. And how does USC respond off of a loss? They've covered 7 of their last 11 as home favorites dating back to last year. Utah just is not good enough on the road. And that, I think, was what really talked me out of it. Now, would I be absolutely floored to see Utah win this game? Of course not. If Caleb Williams plays like he did last week, or if Cam Rising is able to muster together 250 yards of offense, this could be a very easily like a last-minute field goal type game. It could be 30-27, and I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest.
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring it up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Utah and their defense could win this game. I don't know if Cam Rising is going to go, and that's the problem. He still hasn't played all year, and I just keep, what are they waiting for?
We just keep hearing that he's going to, and then he just doesn't.
So I don't know if he's going to go at all at this point. So
why would you? Would you if you were him?
Probably not.
It's tough. All right. Well, we are up against it. 10 minutes from now, we are going to be live on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. We're going to get this guy out. We're going to do the hustle. You, me, Drew, Adam Trigger, the Gamecocks fan. Oh, boy. At least I have someone to blame. You know what? That's the good news. I have someone to blame when they get blown out. Okay? There we go, CT. There's my rationale. All jokes aside, we love Adam. He's just our little brother punching bag. Make sure you guys are following CT at CT Bets. Make sure you guys are following me at Kelly in Vegas, and we'll see you guys next week.